A restaurant opening in New Orleans isn't usually a source of much controversy, but when a new dining experience called Straya opened on St. Charles Avenue in early 1997, it caused a citywide stir, pitting two very different local icons against each other in a feud that had the city abuzz during that year's Mardi Gras season. In one corner, we have Straya's owner, Al Copeland, the founder of the Popeyes chicken chain. Al was a showy, outlandish and incredibly successful entrepreneur with a near unbeatable nose for the food business. In the other corner, we have Anne Rice, the gothic queen of the city, introverted and intellectual, and with a literary empire of her own, founded on globally revered novels such as Interview with the Vampire. On paper, these titans have a lot in common. Both Al and Anne were baby boomers and hugely respected in their fields. Both came from working class Catholic families, both were self-made and had strong, if very different, personalities. Both inarguably loved New Orleans though. On some level, they both dealt in fantasy and escapism, and both, in their own ways, strive for a kind of transcendence of everyday life in New Orleans. Both Al and Anne had made it. They were rich, professionally fulfilled, and generally well loved. By 1997, Copeland had sold Popeyes, though his family retained control of the secret recipes. It had become a hugely successful fast food chain, but Copeland had moved on, forming a new empire of restaurants, including Copeland's Cheesecake Bistro, hotels, comedy clubs, and Straya, which was billed as a California Creole cafe. It opened at 2001 St. Charles Avenue in place of an old Mercedes-Benz dealership. The restaurant's decor was not subtle. The interior had metal palm trees, tassel black curtains, and leopard sculptures, while the exterior was a kind of Art Deco fever dream, with neon stars, a peach paint job, and a drive-through archway. It was a typical Copeland statement of exhibitionism, a building formed of pure showmanship. Anne Rice had thoughts. This particular address was of some importance to her. It was at 2001 St. Charles Avenue where the main character from her novels, the vampire Lestat, sees his own reflection in the window of that specific Mercedes-Benz dealership and ceases to exist. On top of this, Rice's aesthetic vision of the city was the polar opposite of Al's. She loved the historic and religious buildings, classicism and tradition, the city's story told seriously through its architecture. She was reclusive and a romantic in the poetic sense of the word. As Al said diplomatically at the time, "I live in the future, she lives in the past." As Al and Anne both knew though, New Orleans is a city that celebrates both. Anne Rice did not generally give newspaper interviews, and so the first news of her discontent with Straya came as a surprise to almost everyone. On February the 7th, 1997, just 4 days before Mardi Gras Day, Rice took out a full-page ad in the Times-Picayune.
A special message to our Mardi Gras visitors, our tourists, and our citizens. I wish you a warm welcome for this carnival season and ask that you let me express my personal humiliation, regret, and sorrow as private citizen Anne Rice for the absolutely hideous Straya's restaurant, which has just opened its doors on St. Charles Avenue. This monstrosity in no way represents the ambiance, the romance, or the charm that we seek to offer you and strive to maintain in our city. It is as if Mr. Copeland has taken every fast food restaurant from here to Panama City and combined them into one ludicrous and egregious structure. That this restaurant stands in the same block with the venerable Pontchartrain Hotel doubles the insult to all of us. The strip of St. Charles Avenue between Lee Circle and Jackson Avenue is a key part of our city where black families and white families congregate for Mardi Gras. The restaurants along this strip, Shoney's, Houston's, the Caribbean Room, Delmonico's, have all given pleasure to New Orleanians. Straya's, however, is nothing short of an abomination, and Mr. Copeland should be ashamed. As a resident of New Orleans, I am distressed. I am sure that I do not speak for myself alone in saying that, in spite of this most recent insult to all of our preservation goals, New Orleans remains our pride and joy. The humblest flophouse on this strip of St. Charles Avenue has more dignity than Mr. Copeland's structure. What makes this really tragic is the fact that the structure of the restaurant itself is potentially beautiful. Remodeling promised a real asset to the avenue. Instead, we have an eyesore. New Orleanians, I urge you to exercise your constitutional right as Americans and let Mr. Copeland know your feelings in writing or by phone calls. Maybe then Mr. Copeland will realize the gravity of his mistake and do something to show respect for his fellow citizens and his city. Once again, a warm welcome to all of our Mardi Gras visitors from all over the world. Signed, Anne Rice, author of Interview with the Vampire.
Copeland was never going to take this kind of criticism lying down, and he immediately fired back with a 2-page ad of his own.
Dear Anne, in response to your very public attack against me and Straya in the Times-Picayune this Friday, some might conclude that anyone who doesn't share your taste in architectural design is guilty of terrible things. But how do you feel about abandoned buildings, urban decay, and unemployment? After reading your ad, I was so shocked that I went to your home to talk it over. I don't understand what possessed you to personally attack me and my company so publicly. I was told that you were unfortunately unavailable for comment. As proof that differences in taste are normal, I am sending you this picture of the St. Charles Avenue structure that used to be filled with asbestos, underground storage tanks, and lead paint. It was empty for 3 years, a poor prospect for urban renewal and a significant black eye for New Orleans. Check out the other St. Charles Avenue properties in the photos to your left. Then take a look at these properties off St. Charles Avenue. Most people would agree that Straya now compares favorably to neighboring properties. You spoke of the dignity of flop houses. Straya is a magnificent example of urban redevelopment in an important enterprise zone. I could have torn the building down, but I elected to try to keep the structure in shape and spent $200,000 to do it. From the tone of your ad, I would suppose that you actually prefer the neighborhood as it was before I opened Straya. I admit that this landscape might make a fitting backdrop for one of your vampire novels. Is this what you mean by showing respect for our city in this critical time when we have thousands of visitors from around the world? I'm excited about our new Straya, and I am also very proud of the long hours and the huge financial investment that made it happen. For the record, hundreds of local construction workers, craftspeople, and other professionals were employed to bring it to life. It is now a spectacular restaurant, the second Straya in an innovative dining concept, and another internationally recognized New Orleans first. Prior to starting this development, we went to the neighbors, organizations, and proper channels. It's not as if we built it overnight under cover of darkness. Work began last February. Our first Straya in Metairie is similar in design, so everyone, including you, knew what to expect. In fact, I think Straya has the same warm peach color that you have on your own St. Charles Avenue house down the street. As an artist, Anne, you should know that taste is purely subjective. I happen to believe Straya is a fine merger of contemporary and classic design. Art Deco has been around since the 1920s, about the same period as the building. Most of my customers and neighbors seem to agree. An Interfax daily poll last week said 78% to 22% that my design should not be changed. I respect your right to disagree, but after restoring an important property, putting a sizable dent in the area's unemployment rate, and providing yet another fine dining option in our great city, I think I have the right to say that good manners and common sense are far more important than anyone's personal notions about good taste. And if I didn't take your rude, unwarranted personal attack so seriously, I might be amused. But you did have one good suggestion. I'm inviting everyone to visit Straya and participate in a poll to determine the real public opinion. Anyone participating will receive a gift certificate as my thanks. Anyone bringing in your ad from Friday's Times-Picayune will receive a special gift. Sincerely, Al Copeland. P.S. See you in court. In the meantime, I'm putting a little extra garlic in the food at Straya, keeping a crucifix under my pillow, and carrying a wooden stake for good luck.
Shots, as they say, fired. The feud started to fascinate the city, and soon enough newspapers were running opinion polls and cartoons, and hastily made caricatures and banners were added to parade floats. The Times-Picayune were firmly Team Copeland, running a piece asking if Anne Rice had actually lost her mind. Some readers responded supporting Rice though, saying that Straya had the appearance of a hillbilly that's moved into a Santa Monica bungalow. In general, it was all good knockabout fun, and cultural jabs were traded by both sides. Eventually though, long after that year's Mardi Gras had ended, the serious side of the matter started up. Al made good on his threat and sued Anne for defamation. The American Civil Liberties Union lined up to defend Rice, claiming that it was well within her First Amendment rights. Meanwhile, Straya had lines out of the door every single night. Anne Rice may have been bookish and reserved compared to Al and his jet-set lifestyle, but she wasn't shy when it came to business and self-publicity. She had interests of her own. She employed a staff of 50 to oversee what she called her creative expansion. This included a tour company, a perfume, a wine label, and a boutique where fans could buy t-shirts bearing MRI images of her brain. So far, so metal, but it also came out in the subsequent legal hearings that she had her own designs on 2001 St. Charles Avenue. It was on her radar as a location for a future Café Lestat, a restaurant that you can imagine would not share much in the way of aesthetics with Straya. This plan of Anne's made a real difference. When it came out, Al amended his defamation lawsuit into an allegation of unfair and deceptive trade practices. He argued that the author was not criticising his restaurant as a private citizen, but rather as a business competitor, an entrepreneur with a financial stake in a similar venture, and therefore she had an economic incentive to badmouth Straya. On a hot and humid September afternoon, Copeland's legal team jumped on this perceived weakness, and Rice was summoned for a deposition. Things looked to be going Al's way for a while. "Did you have any thoughts to buy 2001 St. Charles?" asked Copeland's attorney. "Definitely," Rice answered. The deposition continued for a while before the judge eventually tossed the case out before it could go to court. It was legally decreed that Rice was within her First Amendment rights, but it may have been a Pyrrhic victory for the author. It caused much local excitement and gossip, and likely both parties made lots of money out of the visibility and free advertising that a press cycle and frenzied public interest can bring. But Straya stayed open until 2000, when Copeland closed it and replaced it with the more subdued Cheesecake Bistro, which itself closed in 2018. Anne Rice never did get to buy the property and build her Vampire Cafe at 2001 St. Charles Avenue, but in 2019, Al Copeland Jr. opened a new restaurant in the space called No Lay. At the restaurant's entrance was a bookshelf with titles by many New Orleans authors, including Anne Rice. The fight certainly fired up the locals for a while, but both Al Copeland and Anne Rice eventually moved on to even more success in their respective fields. Sadly, Copeland and Rice have both passed on. Copeland died of cancer in March 2008, and Rice died following a stroke in December 2021. Publicist and writer Kit Wall knew them both. "I actually think that if Al and Anne ever met, they would really like each other," she said to the Times-Picayune in 1997. Despite their very public differences, Copeland and Rice did have a lot in common, not least their passionate love of the city. In a strange but perhaps fitting twist of New Orleans fate, in the Metairie Cemetery, their respective burial plots are just feet away from each other. Hopefully Anne is sat in the back of Al's celestial speedboat, reading out passages from her novels aloud as they glide across the clouds. If nothing else, at least they can both talk about garlic.